Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is your host, Crystal Jordan, and welcome to another Sisters with Superpowers author to author book chat. I'm your host, Crystal Jordan, and I'm super excited to be here. Today is a very special author to author conversation because it's an author that I am, first of all, personal friends with, but most importantly, I am so honored to have her here because the work that she's doing is so important. So, we're going to talk about her book. What was I supposed to do? But we're also going to talk about her made for TV movie about the story of her life. For her to be not yet 50 years old, and I'm not even quite sure of how old she is, but she's definitely a very young woman, and she's already had a movie made on Lifetime about her life story. So please help me welcome the very beautiful, the very accomplished, my friend, Dr. Nicola Mitchell.
Hey girl,
Hello.
hi.
How
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm good, Queen. How you doing?
I am well. I am well. Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we're finally getting a chance to do this
Me too.
after, it's been a while that I've been wanting to have this conversation, but I think this time is the right time. So welcome.
It was never late for God's timing, right? God knows the right time. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I want to talk about your book. What was I supposed to do? And I'm going to be honest with you. It was very difficult for me to read. It's just heartbreaking. And we know that the situations happen. And so aside from it being about a girl that, goes through, that deals with sexual abuse, has a mother that's on drugs, it's a lot of pain in the lead character Harper's life, but also you write the story. The story is written from the perspectives of not just Harper, but also her mother and even one of the abusers, James. So, first of all, I want to ask you, what made you take that approach? Because, in a way, you kind of humanized her mother, Christine, who was definitely a big part of the reason that Harper ended up in the situation that she was, and then also James, who was I felt like you tried to show us who he was. There are good parts and bad parts of all of us, but it's just interesting to be able to humanize, people that do unspeakable acts.
So first of all, I am just happy that you use the words humanize because that is exactly my point that I wanted to do for all the characters, especially Harper. With Harper being the age that she is and the things that she's done, like being in trouble, going to jail, things like that, the world automatically criminalize and over sexualize our girls.
Right.
So when people hear of a girl in jail because she was abused or raped or something it had to be her, something that she did. And I
Mhm.
wanted to write the story from the point their first encounter perspective, because I think if people were to see things from their lens, then they would be able to humanize these characters, especially the girls, and then be able to give them the help instead of just writing them off. Hence
Mhm.
the title, What Was I Supposed to Do? If you know what my world looks like for real, what am I supposed to do? Right. And I wrote the book because I felt like I let some girls down. Hello, how are you? But I felt like I let these girls down. I actually go into jail in Vegas and I put Girls Who Brunch tour on for these girls. So they're from the ages of 12 to 17. And
Mhm.
these girls are actually certified as adults.
Mhm.
And I actually met five girls and I combined the character of Harper between all five of their
Oh
stories.
wow. So there is, even though this is fiction, there is a lot of real life to this. And I thought that's why I was like, oh wow, it's so sad. I recently saw Sound of Freedom a few days ago, and I'll be honest with you, it's hard because I think that we hear sex trafficking, we hear girls, we hear that young women are, abused sexually by adults, and sometimes other women are a part of that. And I think when you hear it, it's like you said, a lot of times you think, oh, well, that could never happen to my daughter, or that could never happen to my sister, or because we try to, it's human instinct to try to think, well, there had to be something very different about that situation. But I think what we're realizing, because the numbers are so high, is that eventually, if we don't do something and work together, those, there are no girls that are immune, or that cannot end up in that situation. What do you think is the biggest misconception right now? Because a lot of people, I believe a lot of people hear the word sex trafficking, but very seldom do we actually add a face and an identity to these young women.
So my youngest child that was trafficked was 10 years old in Chicago. And I worked on this case. We named her Hope, right? It's a group of organizations. We came together from across the nation and fought to get the hotel shut down, the motel shut down that she was trafficked out of, because the police actually came. The craziest thing about it, the police actually came, a housekeeper called, and she was just like, this is not right, and the little girl, she's brown, she's a black girl, and but she looks like a 10-year-old, because the first thing everybody asked was, well, what does her body look like what does it matter if she was overly endowed? What did it matter? But she looks like a 10-year-old, right? And the police, the housekeeper called the police. He came and took her home and let him go. And she was actually there with a person that was a registered sex offender who was the same. I'm 44 years old, and at the time I was 42, and he was the same age as me. And she was there with him, and they just let her go. He took her home, and the baby was trafficked 4 times. And the beautiful thing about life is that she knew that this was not right. So every time she has went to the hospital and has had sex rape kits done on her. So
Multiple times?
she
Oh
had
my
it
God.
in her multiple times. Okay. So she's had rape kits done on her because she's been in the system. She is a
Mhm.
case of a child that it shows the a child slipping through the cracks. Because when I say, when we are fighting to find out more about her background, her case, her, what the child protective services initiatives have been, when I say everybody that could have touched her to help prevent this from happening touched her. She has been in had so many caseworkers, so many people, and she was still able to be trafficked, and she wasn't held captive. She went home every day.
Oh wow.
She was 10 years old, and they even took her across state lines to
Wow.
Indiana. How can this happen? And they only promised her candy and weed. So I
It's
and whenever that's it. That's what he promised her the first time. That's it. She's 10, right? And she's thinking she's doing something that's cool because she's seeing her older cousins and things like that, smoking weed, doing stuff. She's thinking that what she's doing is cool. And then the other thing is, because she has been tied down, the baby said she felt the most safe being tied down. So now she's
mm,
openly telling you this, and she's telling the predator, and predators prey on you, because I was preyed on, right? And I used to think
mhm.
something was wrong with me. So I really take these cases so to heart, because it happened to me multiple times. And I used to think
Right.
something was wrong with me during this process. And so she's telling somebody that's a predator, these things, and they're using that against her. And
Against
so
her.
I think the world, though, they do feel like this could not happen to them. But I say girls are at risk, and people get offended when I say that my program is for girls who are at risk. They automatically think it's low income. No, if they walk to school by themselves, they're at risk. If they have a cell phone, they are at risk.
Oh, well, then we're
Because
all at risk at that point. They're all at risk.
exactly, because their friends are recruiting. These people are sending their friends to recruit. They're sending
Mhm.
little boys to recruit. So these little girls are meeting boys online or meeting boys out, and they think this is their boyfriend, and they never go home. So they're all at risk. And in every city I include human trafficking initiatives and safety. So
Mhm.
this year with my tour is the Dreams Worth Fighting For, because Girls Who Brunch was my dream worth fighting for. But I'm protecting Black girls as well, because I'm protecting their mind, body, and spirit. And how do we do that? Showing them how to get out of grass if somebody try to grab them. Showing them how to protect themselves online and within their communities. So,
Mhm.
I think if more people, like I said initially, if they really look at these girls and humanize them, they will see themselves or their children in them in these stories.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you all are just joining. Of course, this is the Sisters with Superpowers author to author chat. And aside from just talking about a book today, we're talking about something that is extremely important. Author Dr. Nicola Mitchell is with us today, and she has a book, What Was I Supposed to Do? And the book deals with some of these issues. Interesting to hear that you took a collective of various girls' stories to create this book. But we also are going to talk about the movie, the Dr. Nicola Mitchell story that aired earlier this year on Lifetime, that was about your story and about this work that you're doing. And you were actually played by actress Tatyana Ali, which had to be a great honor for you. But before we get
Yeah.
into that, Nicola, I want to talk about your story, because I think what makes you the perfect person to do this, and why you've had the success that you have. I know that you've been named as L'Oreal's Woman of the Year, and you have so many accolades, but it really comes from the point that you took your in the story. It talks about taking well, actually, Tatiana talks about taking pain and turning it into purpose. And it seems like that's what you've been able to do. But I want to ask you initially, how were you able to do that? Because being able to share your past and what happened to you, that had to be difficult, at first, because this is something that we still really, women are still shamed because of their experiences and things that happen. It's a difficult topic. So what happened that empowered you to be able to share your story, and then to be able to connect with young girls that were dealing with the same thing?
So I never spoke about what happened to me until I was 33 years old. I started going to therapy for my daughter.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was 33. We moved to Atlanta for my daughter's medical treatments, and I started going to therapy for her. And so, they for the therapist to understand the dynamics between me and my daughter, they needed to know my background. So I was, she's asking me things, and then at one point she's like, Did you like your mom?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, what are you talking about? And because you don't know that some of these things just weren't supposed to happen, and to the therapist, she was just like clutching her pearls, like, what? Like, wait a minute. And that's what allowed me to open up. And it actually allowed me to contact one of my predators and tell him that I forgave him. And because I started going to church, I started on a whole internal healing for myself, because I didn't know that I was broken or bruised. I didn't know
Hmm.
that those things were in the back of my mind, but I just used tunnel vision to not focus on it. And
Hmm.
once I really start talking about it, and um, uh, forgiving myself and them,
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
I start seeing that the blemishes on my face start going away. I start seeing the weight going away. I start seeing all these things going away. And
Hmm.
then I met these girls in Charleston, South Carolina, and they didn't know that pizza came in a box. And that was like 2016. And I was like 2015, 2016. And I was like, what? They were at a book signing. I came there, and these girls never seen a black author in a bookstore, but they didn't even know pizza came in a box. So that group of girls is what motivated me to come back. But now,
Hmm.
just talking to them on a smaller level, I start sharing stuff about me to show that, we're the same. And I just
Hmm.
use that blueprint in the program. And it's very impactful, because when they name off all these accolades, Forbes, Black Enterprise, da 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 da, but then I'm like,
Hmm.
I was raped at 14 in church by my choir director. I was molested. I was raped 4 times before I turned 16. I had my daughter at 15. By the time I'm very vulnerable and open, we had a roundtable panel discussion that the girls would a fishbowl, and they would put their questions in anonymously. And the questions
Hmm.
could range from, how did you start your business, to what if your attacker comes to you at night? What if my mother said that I'm a mistake? And so that's what allowed me to open up and go deeper and deeper within my story, because I'm seeing that the more I talk about me, the more these girls are talking, but then the
Hmm.
more the women in the room are talking. So by the
Right.
time the event is over, I got women crying, I got people coming over talking about this happened,
Hmm.
this, that. And it's, I mean, photographers, videographers, and it's like, okay, there's something going on that's right in this. And that's what's
Hmm.
motivated me to continue to do this.
What do you think is the key? Because I know that self-esteem is something that people say, oh, you have to have self-esteem, right? You have to have self-esteem. But it's also this very intangible thing that is hard for girls that haven't experienced any trauma sometimes to connect with. So for you, how were you able to, um, I guess, connect with that internal part of yourself and build your self-esteem after going through so much trauma? Because I think, again, that's something that we hear and we tell people, but we don't really know what that looks like. So what things did you do, and what things do you encourage young girls that have gone through sexual trauma specifically, in order to get their sense of self up, so that they know that they don't deserve that, and they deserve everything this world has to offer?
Number one, like again, forgiving yourself. Because a lot of times we blame ourselves because society has told us, you've heard it so many times, that if something
Hmm.
has happened to you, that it was your fault. What did you have on? What did you look like? I had a friend of mine who said that she was raped she was ditching one day, and she was
Hmm.
raped at her friend's house. But she never said anything because she shouldn't have been there in the first place. And you
Hmm.
have to forgive yourself to know that whatever happened to you is not your fault.
Right.
You
Right.
If you did not give that authority to happen, it's not your fault. And then once you start forgiving yourself and start talking to yourself and letting yourself know that you are beautiful, that you are enough, that you can
Hmm.
accomplish anything, that you can do anything, you will see the change in yourself. And then prayer
Hmm.
without work is dead. So I also say you could pray about it and ask God to fix you, but He got to see what you're doing too.
Hmm.
And it has to meet in the middle. I just had another interview with somebody, and she said that, oh, I have not accomplished the huge things that you've done. I've only done little things. And I had to tell her, I'm like, baby, everything I've done have been little. I just keep going.
Mm.
So once you start seeing the fruits of that, and it doesn't have to be an organization, it can be something as, again, losing weight. It could be something as in starting a book project, starting a business. Once you start seeing the fruits of you pouring into yourself, that is what's going to allow your self-esteem to come up.
Hmm.
Because I can walk in a room. It's so funny. I walk in a room and I'm very quiet. I'm the quiet friend. I'm the behind the scenes friend. But my energy brings people to me to ask me who I am.
Hmm.
But once you start becoming happy with yourself, that happiness exudes. But we have to figure out how to become happy with ourselves. We as women and girls, we become happy with friends and men
Right.
and boys in situations like that. But once you become happy with yourselves, your self-esteem will go up.
I like that. I like that. Well, I want to play this clip from the Dr. Nicola Mitchell story with Tatyana Ali. And then I want to talk a little bit about how you started writing and became this prolific author. And then, of course, what was the process to ending up with your story being told on Lifetime. Let's check out this clip from Lifetime TV's The Dr. Nicola Mitchell story.
I read the story and I had to put it down several times to take a breath because it's very emotionally charged, and and you know immediately I just wanted to meet Dr. Nicola, and I did, and I wanted to be a part of the effort of giving her her flowers while she's in the midst of her work. There's so much to her story that I relate to personally. I've done mentorship for, most of my life, definitely most of my career with girls. I connected to that. The way she turned her pain into a purpose in a real life way, I connected to that. And I connected to the truth of her mission, which is, our children need love and care and attention.
All right, all right. Don't forget to read and annotate chapters 3 and 4 by tomorrow.
I love that. First of all, what was that experience like, seeing your life story played out on television? That had to be something that you couldn't even imagine when you were a young girl.
So I used to write stories all the time. When I came to America, I'm from Jamaica.
Hmm.
I came to America when I was young, and I used to write these stories about my life is going to be great. I'm going to be this prolific writer. They used to tell me that I was going to be able to write books. I'm left-handed, so I wasn't going to be able to write books, and I was going to go to heaven. I still have the mark on my hand that I got hit in my hand every day to try to make me write with my right hand. And so I would write these stories, like proving everybody wrong in my stories. So to have Tatyana, first of all, Lifetime approached me and on social media. They approached me on social media and said they wanted to do this. I thought it was fake. It was with no icons, stuff like that. And I'm the producer. I'm like, what? This is fake. And I told Zane, I asked her, she's my big sister mentor, and I said, is this production company real? And she was like, yeah, they are. I'm like, well, why would they want to do a movie about me? And she's like, at that time I was in Indianapolis, my foot was broken. I flew out there to take a little girl to homecoming. I bought her a
Mm-hmm.
dress, got her clothes, and all this stuff. And she was like, okay, so if you heard this story that this lady flew to Indianapolis with a broken foot ankle to take a child at homecoming, blah, blah, blah. When you say she's amazing, and I was like, yeah. She said, well, Heifer, you are amazing. But my friends and my people have to tell me that because I'm just doing what I would want somebody to have done for me or my children. And
Mm-hmm.
so to see it was crazy because in the deal, I negotiated to become an executive producer of the movie. And I did not know how important that was. Just as a writer, I just wanted the credit. But I did
Mm-hmm.
not know how important that was in the process until we were actually in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me leverage with having a Black female director, allow me to be able to pick who my main character was. So the production team worked with Tatyana on several movies. And because
Mm-hmm.
she's from the Caribbean, because we have the same facial features and stuff, we're actually a couple days apart. Um, that's why they picked her. And we just became best of friends, close. She's like my family to this day in the process. And we would just be on Zoom like this and just talk to each other. And I didn't understand that I blinked slowly until I'm watching her. It was surreal. And then going on set in Canada while the filming was crazy. Seeing Girls Who
Mm-hmm.
Brunch on everything, because that was the name of the movie at first.
Oh wow.
So there's
Wow.
20 vehicles, and this is a $1 million production, which is small.
Mm-hmm.
They kept saying, but to me that was a lot. And seeing
Yeah.
all these vehicles and transports and restaurants and things being shut down with my something that I came up with was just so
Mm-hmm.
surreal. And seeing
Yeah.
people play me and my children, I'm like, wow, they auditioned to be my kids. It was crazy. It's still a surreal experience,
Mm-hmm.
one that I will never forget and never take for granted.
Well, it was beautiful because I've known you a long time and just seeing the fruit of your labor pay off and that type of celebration. A lot of times we don't celebrate people, as she said, like until it's they they've been retired and done and things like that.
Yeah.
But to be able to be celebrated while you're still doing the work. What did the girls in the program say? Have you had an event? Oh, you did. You had one in Memorial Day weekend. So what did the girls in the program say after seeing the movie and realizing it was about the program that they were a part of?
So I incorporate my kids in everything, in every award and everything they're incorporated in. So in the process, I even had like Kalia and DC pick the music that the girls in the movie were performing to,
Oh,
right? Like
nice.
I made sure my kids were included. So a
Hmm.
group of them actually were able to see it in DC at the Black Girls Rock movie premiere, and to
Hmm.
hear them stand up and say that the brunch was what exactly how it feels for them. That was
Yeah.
the biggest thing to me. When they were asking me to come film, um, they were like, "What scenes do you want to be?" I said, "I don't care. I just want to be there for the brunch, the integrity of the
Hmm.
brunch. Like, I don't care about the rest of the movie, but I want my kids to feel it." So they used my actual signage from the Girls Who Brunch tour. They flew all that in, and I actually worked with the girls on set. And
Hmm.
they didn't know it was me at first. And I walked in and I'm like, "Hey, like period, you gotta, but whatever." So they were like, "This was the easiest set of kids to work with." But I'm like, I hyped them up like I do for Girls Who Brunch.
Yeah.
But the whole process, I had my girls involved from my Girls Who Brunch tour girls, not my kids. They were
Right. Right.
involved
Right.
too, but I made sure the Girls Who Brunch tour girls were involved, and
Hmm.
I made sure they were able to go to every screening in Vegas and
Right.
Atlanta. It was important that they were there, and they were
Hmm.
just excited. It was a beautiful process.
That's got to be a great experience for them, right? That's got to be like even more, for you. But I mean, it has to that's going to change a lot of their lives to have been a part of something that validated them in such a huge way, being so young. All right, so let's go back even further into the Dr. Nicola Mitchell story. Let's talk
Okay.
about when you first published your first book, because this is author to author chat, and that's actually how we met. When I was at Barnes
Hmm.
and Noble when I met you years and years ago. And I think that's something that we have in common, that love for literature. And just I was the kid that I would write all the time as well, because it was like somebody asked me today, like, when did you start writing? And I was like, if you're a writer, you've probably always written. I didn't get published until I was 26, but was a writer at like second grade, just because that was an escape for me. So let's talk about your journey to actually becoming a published author. How did that start and how did that happen?
So, like you, I was a writer since I was a little girl. I was in every lit class, and
Yeah.
but I was in a bad relationship. So let's keep it real. I was in a bad relationship.
Most of us were at some point in time.
And I wrote about it. I mean, well, I would document it. So in my
Okay.
very first book, over and over again, the opening scene, there's a young lady in the garage naked, hiding, and that really happened. I would just
Mm,
document like all this crazy stuff that he was doing. And so at my undergrad party, my friends and family dared me to write, turn it into a book. And
mm,
that's the best thing you can do for me to do something. Dare me to do it. I'm gonna do it.
mm, mhm,
And I did it. I wrote the first book, and I submitted it to a couple of publishers. And then
mhm,
Tressa, she had Life Changing Books at the time. She and I spoke, and she said, "I think you should try to publish this yourself." And
mhm,
I was like, "You sure?" She's like, "Yeah, I think you should try to publish it yourself. Try it, and then if it doesn't work, then you can try to resubmit. But I think you should try to publish it yourself." And she doesn't know that that was the best advice that anybody could have given me. And then I met Tamika Newhouse, which is one of my best friends. I was 16 years ago now. And we
wow.
were dropping our books together and we grinded it out. And 18 books later, I'm here, but the first book was written off of a dare. And I went on a full tour before
Mm,
the book came out. I had the first chapter, a life-size poster of the book, and postcards. And I sold the book for $10. I sold 800
mm,
copies of the book before the book even came out. I used a
mm,
lot of guerrilla marketing skills to
mhm,
get where I am. And so by the time the book came out, I became a bestseller in 10 months. And
wow.
then by the time the second book came out, that book was number one on Amazon for over a year. And
Mhm.
by the time the third book came out, I was able to quit my job.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's not the story of a lot of authors, because it's a lot different. Now, when you first started, it's still a very different landscape now, because there is the opportunity to, turn books into television, movies, or into series. What was the process? Well, you said that Lifetime reached out to you, but I know you have other books that are actually in production to be television projects.
Hmm.
What do you think is the key to a great story that can go from the actual book to live television or a movie? What do you think that consistent theme is that makes a story prime for television or movies?
Be real, and also don't stay within that cookie cutter box of the storytelling. Whenever I write any story, I go what would make, like, if it's a straight line, I go
Hmm.
left. I don't go
Hmm.
right. I'm busting a bunch of lefts, right?
Hmm.
Because I
Hmm.
always try to do what is opposite what you think is going to happen. So
Right.
you're not going to be able to guess what's going to happen. And so I end up finding out that thrillers and those type of books were my favorite books to write. So,
Really.
but being honest, and I love writing from the first person because people really relate to the characters. So I think
Hmm.
I wrote my first book third person, but after that, every book has been first person, and it
Hmm.
has worked. I've gotten the most reaction and
Mm-hmm.
authentic reactions from people. And so, trying to pitch these projects has kind of been a little easy. It's been a little
Yeah.
easy
Okay.
to do, but I think it's because people, I think people just relate to the story. They're like,
Yeah,
damn,
that's
okay.
when it's first person. It's almost like POV. You're in the story yourself. It's like it causes
Hmm.
you to relate to. That is definitely not my favorite way of writing, but I get it because you feel you. It makes you really connect with that personality and understand where they're coming from a lot quicker. Um, Let me ask you about influences. I know most writers, we're readers first. And I love asking authors what books, who was your favorite author growing up? Or did you see any authors? Were you a fan of books growing up as a child?
Oh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Steele was one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite authors because how big her books were, and they were full. They weren't boring. Their
Right.
Kaleidoscope, none of those books were boring. They were so big,
Mm-hmm.
and like I've read big books and you fall asleep, but her
Yeah.
books just kept me on the edge of my feet. So I was like, okay, when I'm writing, I need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But VC Andrews,
Yeah,
Flowers
that's
in
a
the Attic, If There'll Be Thorns.
yeah.
She taught me honestly that there's nothing wrong with me in her
Mm,
books because every one of her characters, main characters, had something happen to them, and they were
mm,
all ethnic. They were black, white,
right.
Hispanic, poor, rich,
Mm-hmm.
and they showed me a different way to that what happened to me is very normal, which shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
normal, but
Right.
it happens in so many different situations. And her writing style is what I really use for as an influence in my writing styles.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
love the way
interesting.
she writes.
I have never heard someone's. I've never. I mean, I'm familiar with her work. I did not like mysteries and scary things, so I kind of stayed away from it. But I get that. But I've never heard anyone reference that. That's real. I grew up definitely Danielle Steele, and her stories were big, and they also. I loved it, that a lot of times they were intergenerational, right? So you would see what
Hmm.
happened with a daughter and the effect that it had when she became a mother later. Like you would see those those stories that we're able to show continuity from what happens to you as a kid and how it affects you later
Hmm.
on. 18 books, that is amazing. That's a huge accomplishment. I am always trying to give you as many flowers as I can because I just think you're amazing. Most importantly, not just because of your writing talent, but really because you're one of those rare people that is living in real time, really putting their money where their mouth is. Most importantly, putting their energy. And whenever, from the very first time I met you until when the last time I talked to you, you're always talking about Girls Who Brunch. You're always talking about, can you come out for my girls? That is always, the present. The first thing people think of when they think of you is Girls Who Brunch. How did that? How did your nonprofit start? We know that the book started with you writing, and then that first one from a bad relationship. But how did the idea materialize to actually go and start helping girls that have gone through similar things and being this huge force in the nonprofit sector?
So again, that group of girls in Charleston, South Carolina, I was at event, and that's what the movie starts off with at that event. The
Mm-hmm.
Divas Read 2 book retreat. They flew me in. So it started from literature, right? From reading. I was there, and I was one of the featured authors. And I met these girls, and I came back. I just couldn't. It was something about these girls. And I think what really resonated with me because I'm from Jamaica. So the stuff that they were talking about, I can see girls from Jamaica dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
not girls in present day United States. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I need to come back here. And
Mm-hmm.
when I came back there on a Saturday, I met everybody from the superintendent from the school district to some lawyers to the community center people. They all gave it to me. I didn't even have a name.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do this event. I want to do this. And they, when I say they gave me everything, Crystal. And so driving back with my cousin, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And so I just started formulating it from my book launches, because I usually do like a big deal from my book launches, and I broke it down and I just added workshops to that. And then I
Mm-hmm.
came up with the name Girls Who Brunch, because everybody was brunching at the time. And I didn't want it to be a black girl who brunch. I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
an all girls who brunch. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where it came from. And at the very first event, I used my marketing skills, and just bought some pictures,
Mm-hmm.
posted it online of girls having fun. And by that first event, we had 250 girls attend.
Wow. That is
Hmm.
huge. That's
And I
huge.
had a proclamation from the city of Charleston. I got all this stuff. And then I had 9 cities lined up before we even did the first one, just off of the
Mm.
marketing. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And that's where it was birthed. I did not know that it was going to grow into what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do a 500 girls in Vegas and 500 girls in Charlotte. We would get to
Mm-hmm.
40,000 girls. I would hit that
Wow.
40,000 number if I have a
I
thousand
love.
girls in the next 2 events.
Wow.
So who would have
Well,
known
I
8 years
can
later?
do it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I know
who
you're
would have
gonna
known
do
that's
it.
where it came from?
Unstoppable. The meaning of just tenacity and black girl magic all wrapped up in one. What advice do you have? I would love for you to give maybe like 3 points, because a lot of times, like I said, I think that it doesn't have to be. There can be women that have girls that have gone through sex trafficking, or it could just be a bad relationship that really, really does a job on your self esteem and takes away kind of your sense of self. I think most people, probably men and women, experience this. But we know, as women, specifically Black women, how stunting a bad relationship. When I think I was a little bit after I first met you, but early on in our friendship, I went through a really, really painful breakup, divorce, and it really changed. A lot of times, those relationships change your who you are, and it can change
Hmm.
you for the worse or for the better. So maybe 3 points that you would give a woman who is in a bad relationship, a young woman who has experienced something traumatic. And like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily be sex abuse. It could just be something that she's in now. It could be a physically abusive, it could be an emotionally, verbally abusive relationship, someone that needs to move forward, but has found themselves in a situation where some type of interaction with another person has taken their sense of self.
As long as you have breath in your body, you can recreate your circumstance. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can reinvent yourself as many times as you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Every 7 years, your credit score changes. You need to change with your credit score,
That's
and and keep it going. Number two, I'd rather be alone and have Prada than be with somebody who can't give me nada. And then when I say Prada, it does not necessarily have to mean, the finest purses or things like that. But Prada is a self of life. Like, what do you think, right? How do you feel? Prada is happiness. So
mm-hmm.
I'd rather be alone and be happy than be with somebody that's taking that from me. That's number
Mm-hmm.
two. And
Mm-hmm.
number three, find your pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Being smart is pretty. I didn't realize that before. I used to be one of my predators used to tell me that my body was making them do these things to me. So
Mm-hmm.
I used to hate when people call me pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I just now, in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and now becoming okay with somebody calling me pretty. And even if
Mm-hmm.
somebody congratulate me about an accolade, I still duck my head and I'm like, oh, it's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
because when you've been told what you're doing is nothing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still battling that now. So
Yeah.
find your pretty. What is the thing that was taken from you? It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It could be self-esteem. It could be mental health. What was taken from you? And find
Mm-hmm.
it. That's what's going to make you pretty. Those are three
Mm-hmm.
things.
I like that. I love those things. I hope you guys that are out there and listening are writing those down, because I think that's so important, specifically for women. Make sure, as long as you have breath in your body, you can always change your life. And I think that you can change anything, about yourself. You can change your eating
Mhm.
habits, your lifestyle habits, the way you pick men, the way you respond to others. You can change anything about yourself. Of course, rather be alone than be unhappy with someone else. And that last one, find your pretty. I love that. Find what makes you different. Find what makes you stand out. So here we talk, with authors, and I love the fact that writers often find their own writing to be therapeutic and to be like their own medicine, their own therapy. So how has being an author and penning over 18 books, I did have to keep giving y'all those stats because my girl is doing her thing, but how has that helped you in your own personal journey outside of Lifetime and all that, outside of the accolades, but just you in your everyday life? How has writing and being able to, like, get everything out and use writing as a tool for, I guess, being cathartic, how's that helped you to develop personally?
It has helped me so much. I used to be so angry. I know it's so funny to hear that. Nobody can believe that, right? I used to be so angry. I used to be that girl that was down to fight. Girl, they like, she got hands. I did. I used to have hands. I used to be that girl, right? And writing allowed me to tell these stories, not necessarily of trying to hurt somebody, but getting that hurt out. I was stalked before. I wrote a book about that. Even though it wasn't about that story, I wrote about the fear. I was in a
Hmm.
bad relationship. I wrote about that. I had
Hmm.
people, somebody that was close to me died. I wrote about that. Every
Hmm.
book that I've written had something happen. And if it wasn't to me directly, it was around somebody around me or something around me. And I wrote the situation. Well, what was I supposed to do? I actually wrote a mother's voice. So the mother's voice, and she is really harsh and
She
extreme in
is.
that book.
She is.
That's a real mom I deal with to this day. I still deal with her,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I write about it instead of going out here and doing something to somebody. Instead of going on online and doing all this craziness, I just write it in books. And that's how I find my solace, because I'm able to. I think that's my superpower. I have two superpowers. I can walk into any room with any group of girls that have never met me before, and I can control the room. It's
Hmm.
so funny. I watch it. There's all these people in the beginning of every city. They're trying to hype these girls up. Da, 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 da.
Hmm.
Girl, I come on a stage with my personality and I
Hmm.
take over this room. I have these girls dancing, swag surfing. I've had 1,000 girls in a room at one time. And I
Hmm.
and I can do whatever. And that's one of my superpowers, but also the ability to write about the bad and turn it into good. What the devil meant for bad, God meant for good. And I'm able to show that within my writing. And that's a superpower.
I love that. Well, that makes sense because we are here with the Sisters with Superpowers author to author chat. And we definitely believe that there's so many of us. Everyone has a superpower, and all that matters is when you tap into yours. So, last question, Nicola. Everybody that hears, it's funny because being an author, everybody thinks that they should write a book. Maybe everybody should. I'm not sure. But people always ask you, how did you write a book? How did you get started? So, let me ask you, for people out there, because I'm sure everyone listening to this believes that they should write a book or wants to know how you write a book. So, what would be your advice for getting started? Let's do three more tips for getting started on writing your first book.
Outline is key. I think sometimes people have so many things that they want to write about, and
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know where to start. I just do the old school, whatever the name is, and if I don't have a name, because a lot of times I don't have a name for the book until the end, I
Mm-hmm.
put book one, book two, whatever, and I just do that line grid thing, and I'll just put different topics, and this end up being my chapters. So
Mm-hmm.
outline is key. When I get writer's block, or if it's hard for me to write it out, I talk it out. Because sometimes we could talk, I get on the phone with you and be like, girl, guess what happened? Like, what? Da, 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 da. And we can talk about it. We'll talk your story out. So I'll just record on my phone. And then now
Mm-hmm.
these smartphones will allow you to talk to text, and you can upload that into Word, and then you can type that out. So sometimes it's hard to write it, talk it out.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people, because I ghostwrite too, and a lot of people they can't afford ghostwriters,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I'm stopping my life to write your story. But when I'm ghostwriting, if you can't afford it, I tell people talk it out. It's the same process. And then number three, do not compare yourself to your favorite novel, because
Right.
that writer did not finish that book by themselves. There's a team of editors, there's a team of people that touched that book. There were so many people
Mhm.
that touched that book to make it the thing that you love now.
Mhm. Mhm.
So don't compare yourself, because a lot of people, because I publish as well, a lot of people that come to me, they're stuck because they're comparing themselves to you, me, to whomever, right?
Mhm.
I'm not,
Mhm.
I'm good, but I promise you, my editors made me sound good. They do,
Right.
because they know, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
even join a writer's group or whatever, have other people look at your work and don't take it personal.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's your baby, it's okay, but your baby may have cradle cap. Your baby may have a ring. Your baby need a little treatment to get back on track.
Yeah.
Your baby
Little
may have the
digress.
flu.
Yeah. Little digress there.
Yeah,
No, that's true. And I also think I would say if you are self-publishing, remember that still take note of what Dr. Nicholas said, because a lot of self-published authors, they will not get their book professionally edited because they feel like I can write. But just because you can write doesn't mean you can edit. And I know from working at Barnes and Noble, I used to work as community relations manager for Barnes and Noble for years, and a lot of times self-published authors would come and the book, if it's not edited, there's grammatical errors because it's just you need to get your book professionally edited. So I would say, even regardless, of how you're publishing your book, what you said is so true. There needs to be other eyes on it. Ask someone else. I remember when I was young, I wrote my first story was not about me and being in a relationship. It was about me being married to one of the members of New Edition, and all my girlfriends were married to the other members. So I wrote that book in fourth grade, but I remember sharing it with all my girlfriends. Like, okay, you were married to Ralph, you were married to Mike, but I got their feedback, and that's the only
right,
reason I knew it was good, is because they were just like, "Oh, Crystal, did you bring your book back to school the next day?" So I learned from a very early age to do a focus group, right? So to have people read it,
right.
because a lot of times you may not realize that you need to flush something out a little bit more because it's in your head. So you already know the story, but the reader may not be able to. So I think that's great advice, to be able to make sure other people are a part of that process. Don't ever try to hold your
Yeah.
creative and integrity to yourself, because you do yourself a disservice. I just want to add that on to Dr. Nicola's wisdom there. Before we let you go, I want you to share with people, because you said you do also publish. I want people to be able to look you up if they want to find out more information about the movie that is actually on Lifetime on demand and also on the app, so you can still watch it. And then also your next book project. What is the next book, Nicola?
So my next book project, I have three coming out.
Okay.
But the first one is The Adventures of Legend. It's my children's book series, and it's about my dog Legend. And my daughter had this 65-pound pit illegally on Savannah State University's campus, and
Oh.
he grew up with these girls, and how he had to come home. So I'm teaching HBCU awareness. I'm teaching dog training. And
Mm-hmm.
so Legend, the moral of the story, he's trying to get back to Savannah State University. And so that book is coming out for the holidays. I have a journal coming out, The Dreams Worth Fighting For, a journal for kids and one for adults. And it's
Okay.
interactive. So I'm excited about that. And then I have another book project. I am still in the process. I do not have the name for it. If right
Mm-hmm.
now it's Disappearing Game, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the final title. But
That's it.
that's an adult book. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah,
Okay.
Disappearing Game. So those are three books I
You are
have
a
coming out
talented woman.
next.
You are a talented woman. I cannot imagine working three at a time. For me, one book takes all my everything, and then afterwards, I'm just like, okay, all right. Now, what's the next one about? So I cannot imagine juggling three at a time. Let people know where your website is, so they can find out more about when these books are dropping, and then also more about the books the other 18 that you already got on deck.
So you can find out more about me at I am Nicola. That's IAMNICOLA.com. You can find out more about my organization at girlswhobrunchtour.com. And you can follow me on all social media networks at Dr. Dr. Nicola Mitchell or Dr. Nicola M. Um, and I follow back. I talk. I mean, I'm a hoot. Just follow me. I'm here. And we have 24 more cities for Girls Who Brunch Tour. So you can join us from Vegas all the way to St. Lucia for this year's tour. So I'm
Awesome.
excited.
Ooh. What is there a website for Girls Who Brunch?
Girlswhobrunchtour.com. Spelled
Awesome.
out.
Girlsbrunchtour.com. That makes it easy. Well, first of all, Nicola, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this Sisters with Superpowers author chat. I think, like I said, you are the definition of a sister with superpowers. And I look forward to other people being able to hear this conversation on rollingout.com. So, for those of you that may have joined later in the broadcast, the entire conversation will be on rollingout.com. And hopefully, we look forward to being a part of, as an organization, being a part of Girls Who Brunch. But thank you so much. And thank you so much for all you do for our girls.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for loving me. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Have a blessed evening.
All right, Queen.
All
Bye.
right. Bye. All right. Thank you all for joining another edition of Sisters with Superpowers author to author chat. Today's conversation was a little heavy at times, but like I said, sex trafficking and sexual abuse is something that we all need to be aware of. Make sure you pick up a copy of Dr. Nicola's book, What Was I Supposed to Do? I promise you will never be able to forget reading that book, but it definitely will enlighten you to something that we all need to know more about. All right, stay tuned for more because next month we have another amazing story with another amazing author right here on Sisters with Superpowers Author to Author Chat. I'm your host, Crystal Jordan, and I will see you guys next time.